The sound of a light switching on. My heart jumped. That bedroom had been locked for years, ever since my husband died. No one had the key except me. Slowly, a dim glow began leaking through the ceiling, flickering like someone was walking back and forth with a lamp. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, breath caught in my throat, because everyone else, every single person, was sleeping on the couches downstairs. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay till the end. The house was silent in that thick, heavy way only old family homes can be. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until even your own breathing sounds too loud. I sat up in my armchair, still shaken from what I had seen in the bedroom upstairs. That strange flicker of light in a room no one had touched in years. Everyone else was sleeping on the ground floor because the upper rooms had been shut for so long. My daughter and her family had been using the guest room near the living room, and the children were cuddled up on the sofa bed. That meant I was the only one awake, the only one who even had a view of the staircase that led to the locked bedroom. I kept telling myself it had to be the wiring, a lamp glitch, maybe even a reflection. But the way the light moved wasn't electrical. It pulsed slowly, as if someone was carrying it in their hand. I could still picture the soft glow sliding across the floorboards under the door, like a candle being shielded and unshielded. It made my hands shake. It made my skin prickle. That room had been closed since the day my husband died. I had locked it myself, turned the key, and put it away deep in my drawer. No one had touched it. No one was supposed to. I sat there in the darkness, trying to convince myself I had imagined it, when the floor above me creaked. Not the settling of wood, not the house breathing, but the slow, deliberate weight of a human step. My entire body froze. I listened, holding my breath. Another step, then another, each one steady, careful, as if someone was trying not to wake the rest of the house. I wanted to call out, but my voice stuck in my throat. I felt like a child again, afraid of the dark, except this fear wasn't childish. It was cold, adult, real. A faint shadow moved on the wall near the staircase, just enough for my eyes to catch it. I leaned forward, gripping the arms of my chair. Then came the softest sound, the turn of the bedroom doorknob upstairs. My eyes widened. That door had been locked for years. I knew the sound of that knob better than anything. I remembered how it clicked when my husband opened it late at night to fetch his books, how gently he used to turn it so he wouldn't disturb me. That sound, I would never forget it, and it was turning now, slowly, silently, purposefully. I waited for the light to appear again, to see that flicker under the door crack. But this time, there was nothing, just the doorknob turning, then stopping. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to stand, to scream, to run upstairs, to do something, but I stayed rooted to the chair, gripping the wooden arms as if they were the only thing keeping me upright. Then, silence. A deep, unnatural silence that almost hurt my ears. I kept staring at the staircase, expecting someone to appear, but no one came down. Instead, the house returned to stillness, as if nothing had happened, as if the steps, the shadow, the turning doorknob were all tricks of my tired mind. But I knew they were not. I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. My heart was still pounding when a new sound slipped through the quiet. Not from upstairs, but from the living room where my daughter and her husband slept. A soft cough, a shift of blankets, a murmur. Everyone truly was asleep, which meant whatever was happening upstairs, whoever was moving around in that room, wasn't supposed to be there. I sat awake until the sky began to lighten, unable to close my eyes, unable to convince myself it was harmless. My mind kept returning to the locked door, the flickering light, the turning of the knob, and most of all, the heavy footsteps of someone who should not have been inside my home. When the morning finally came, I felt older, shaken, and unsure of how to begin explaining any of it. But I knew one thing for certain. Something was deeply wrong in that house, and I could no longer pretend it was just my imagination. The next morning I spoke about the light while we ate, and the room felt ordinary again for a moment. But his reaction did not match the ordinary. He moved slowly, as if he had practiced a small, kind smile and was trying it on for me. His smile sat on his face like a mask that did not quite fit. He did not look worried. He did not look surprised. He looked calm in a way that made my stomach ache. The way his shoulders relaxed too quickly made me feel like a stranger in my own house. I watched the lines at the corner of his mouth and the way his eyes slid away when I tried to meet them. Those little movements told me more than a loud word ever could. A normal person would say they would check the wiring, or they would show some small concern. He did none of those things. He answered with a small, easy comment and then turned the conversation to the weather and the garden as if nothing had happened. The words were light. The tone was measured. But the little rhythm in his voice was off. The way a clock runs when its spring is tired. It was the sort of calm that hides a hand behind the back. All morning I carried the feeling like a pebble in my pocket. It was always there, an itch I could not scratch. I remembered the nights when my husband lived, the way he would notice small changes in the house. He would not have let a light go unexplained. He would have climbed the stairs with a torch and a frown, and he would have fixed what needed fixing. He would not have looked away. I found myself comparing the man across from me to that quiet man I missed. The comparison burned. I did not say it aloud. I kept my voice small and steady. I kept my hands folded. Inside, a plan began to form. The plan was patient. It would not yell. It would not break things. It would use eyes and time and small acts like a slow knife, steady and true. After breakfast, I moved to the sink and washed my cup quietly. The house made its usual sounds. A kettle clicked, a footstep in the hallway. Everyone else moved on to their morning tasks as if the night had been regular. As if the crack of light under the door was the kind of thing that happens in old homes. My daughter hummed a song and folded laundry. My grandchildren ran about with a toy. They did not know how a small thing can change the shape of a whole family. They did not yet know that some quiet acts need patient watching. I looked at my son-in-law while he made tea. He walked with a slow step, careful, not hurried. He kept his hands steady. He avoided the room for the rest of the morning. Avoidance is a kind of answer. When a person walks away from a place, it means the place holds something they do not want examined. He passed by the bedroom doorway without a glance. He had always been one to repair a shelf or fix a leak. The choice to step around the door was a choice to leave a question open. A question that would not stay closed if I let it. I tried to catch him in a hallway later. I asked about the wiring out loud, but the question felt small in my mouth. His answer was short and polite. He smiled with that same careful calm. He said it could wait until later. He chose to postpone. Postponement buys time for those who need it. It covers up small mistakes and hides faint traces. That trace of delay was a small bell in my head. It sounded like a warning. I watched him then with a new patience. My eyes kept returning to the bedroom door. I counted the ways a person hides things, by turning away, by making light of the matter, by keeping the day full of chores so no one questions the hours. He filled the day quickly with small tasks. He spoke of the garden and the car and the errands. He made himself busy. Busy people do not want to be watched. All the while, a slow heat rose inside me. It was not anger at first. It was a clear, burning curiosity that felt more clean than rage. I promised myself I would not accuse, I would not shout. I would watch and learn the truth. If the truth was nothing, then I would be at peace. If the truth was not nothing, then the truth would be seen, and I would act on fact, not on fear. I thought of my husband's steady hands and how he never let an unanswered question sit long in the house. I thought of the small dignity we had built, the quiet rules that kept things safe. I would not allow those rules to be broken by a soft smile and a careful hand. The morning passed in a blur of ordinary noise, yet the ordinary now had a cracked edge. I moved through the day with gentle steps, watching the way he handled the kettle, the way he put plates away, the way his gaze always found the window but skipped the bedroom where the light had flickered. Every small movement was a line in a story I did not yet know. I waited. I would wait until night if I had to. When the house grew quiet again, I would be ready to see what he was hiding behind that calm face. I stood in that kitchen after the strange breakfast conversation, and the weight of my memories began pressing down on me so hard that I had to hold the counter to steady myself. The room that flickered with light at midnight was not just any room. It was the room where my late husband spent the last years of his life. Every small detail in that room held a piece of him. His old radio on the nightstand, the stack of books he never finished, the sweater he wore during winter, even the faint smell of the shaving cream he liked. After he passed away, I couldn't bring myself to touch anything. I locked the door and kept the key in the top drawer of my bedside table. Not once did I move it. Not once did I let anyone go inside. That room was frozen in time, untouched for years, because in some way, keeping it locked made me feel like he was still part of the house. My daughter had suggested many times that we should clear the room, maybe renovate it, maybe turn it into a guest room for the grandchildren. She always said it gently, but I could hear the eagerness under her voice. She wasn't being cruel, just practical. Younger people look at space differently. To her, it was simply an unused room, but to me, it was a memory sealed behind a wooden door, a memory that hurt if touched. I told her no every time, and she let the topic rest, but I could see the disappointment on her face. She didn't understand how grief roots itself into objects. After my husband died, the house felt too large and too quiet. The only comfort I had was that locked door upstairs, holding on to him the way I no longer could. My daughter and her family moved in later, saying it would be good for all of us. I would have company, and they would save money. I agreed because I wanted to see my grandchildren grow, and I didn't want to live alone with the echo of my husband's absence. At first, everything was peaceful. My daughter helped with the cooking. The children filled the house with laughter, and I slept easily, knowing family was close. But when my son-in-law lost his job, things began to shift. He became quieter, more irritated, moving through the house as if every wall annoyed him. My daughter picked up extra shifts, leaving him home more often. I noticed him wandering the halls late at night. Sometimes I would hear his footsteps pause at the top of the stairs near that locked room. I brushed it aside, thinking maybe he was just restless or stressed. I never imagined he would enter the room, because only 3 people in the world knew where that key was: me, my daughter, and my late husband. And my daughter had no reason to take it. What troubled me most was the subtle change in the atmosphere of the house. I would catch my son-in-law looking at certain corners or walls with too much interest, as if he was studying something only he understood. When he spoke to me, he was polite, but there was a distance, a coldness, something calculating. I couldn't explain it, but instinct whispered that something was wrong. People forget that older women see more than they say. Age teaches you to read silence better than words. One afternoon, when everyone was out, I sat on the staircase and stared at the door to my husband's room. The memory of that flickering light flashed in my mind again. I knew I hadn't imagined it. I knew it wasn't the wiring. That door had been locked for years. No one should have been in there. But something had changed. A feeling like the air around that room had been disturbed. The next unsettling thing came when I opened my drawer to get the key, just to check it was still there. For the first time, I hesitated before touching it. When I picked it up, a cold shiver ran through my arm. The metal felt slightly warmer than usual, as if someone had held it recently. I tried to calm myself, telling my mind not to jump to conclusions, but I knew the truth before I allowed myself to say it. Someone had been inside the room. Someone had touched the key. Someone had stepped into the one place I had kept sacred. I sat on the bed holding the key tightly in my hand, my throat aching with the weight of worry. That bedroom wasn't just a room. It was history. It was love. It was grief. And someone had walked into it without my permission. Someone had taken something that wasn't theirs to touch. What scared me wasn't the idea of theft. It was the violation of memory, the intrusion into the past I kept sealed for my heart's protection. And as the night approached again, with the whole house settling into silence, I realized that whatever flickered behind that door was not a ghost from the past. It was something far more living, far more dangerous, and far more intentional. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I was tired. Maybe age was playing tricks on my eyes and ears. That is what people my age are always told when we notice something others do not want us to notice. But the signs kept coming, slow and steady, like drops of water carving a hole in stone. It began with the sound of soft movement upstairs, even when everyone was downstairs watching television. A quiet shuffle, the click of a drawer, the faint thump of something being placed on the floor. I would look around the living room and count every person. Everyone was there. Yet I knew someone, or something, was moving upstairs. The next morning, I walked up to the bedroom with a strange feeling in my stomach. The air inside felt different. The smell was not the same as before. It used to smell like old wood and my husband's aftershave, even after all these years. But that morning, it smelled like someone had been there. Warm, stirred air, as if a body had moved around inside. I walked to the dresser and saw one tiny detail that made my heart skip. The top drawer was slightly open, only half an inch, but I never left it open, ever. I closed that drawer properly when my husband died. I did not touch it again. Now it was open, as if someone had looked through it while I slept. I told myself, maybe the wood expanded, even though I knew that was not true. Still, I closed it gently and walked out. But halfway to the stairs, I turned back, feeling the urge to check again, and the drawer was open. Again. Exactly the same gap. Not an inch more, not an inch less. Someone had been in that room while I slept. Someone had touched my husband's things. Someone had put their hands where they had no right to be. During dinner that night, I watched everyone closely. My daughter looked tired, stirring her soup. The grandchildren laughed, spilling crumbs everywhere. And my son-in-law. He kept glancing upstairs, as if checking something in his mind. His fork tapped lightly against the plate, a fast, nervous rhythm. When I looked straight at him, he smiled too quickly, too politely, the kind of smile people give when they are hiding something behind their teeth. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and finished dinner. But that night, the flickering started again. The faint glow under the bedroom door pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a long time, gripping the railing. My heart told me to investigate. My mind told me to stay where I was. I chose silence, for the moment. I went to my room and lay down, but I could not sleep. Every few minutes, I sat up, straining to hear. And then came the sound, a soft closing of a drawer, then another, then footsteps, slow and deliberate, pacing across the floor. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, pause, 4, 5. Someone was up there, and they were not afraid. The following morning brought more signs. The door, which I locked myself every night, was slightly open again. The curtains were drawn, even though I had left them closed. A thin layer of dust on the windowsill had been disturbed, leaving finger marks, wide, heavy ones, not belonging to a child. The picture frame on the bedside table was tilted, the one holding the last photo taken of me and my husband before he passed. I felt something tighten in my chest. That picture was sacred to me. I had never moved it once in all those years. I began looking around the house more carefully. A cold draft came from the top of the stairs, even though all the windows were shut. A faint trail of scuff marks appeared on the wooden floor near the bedroom. I cleaned them off, but by the next morning they were back. I checked the lock of the bedroom door. It was scratched, as if someone had used a tool on it. Someone was trying to break into a room that belonged to my late husband. The room I kept sealed, untouched, respected. And then there were the small personal items that began to vanish. First, his old silver pen, then his pocket knife. Then the small prayer book he carried everywhere during his service days. I asked the family gently if anyone had moved them. My daughter shook her head. My grandchildren didn't even know the room existed. Only one person stayed silent, my son-in-law. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He just smiled, shrugged, and said, Old things disappear over time. That sentence replayed in my head for hours. Old things disappear. My husband's things, my memories, my trust, the flickering light, the missing items, the shifting objects. They were no longer small signs. They formed a pattern, a warning, a truth I didn't want to accept, yet someone was entering that room. Someone was doing more than just looking. Someone was searching. And soon, I would learn exactly what they were searching for. After those long nights of flickering lights and strange sounds, the real fear started when things began to disappear. It didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, one small piece at a time, like someone was peeling away my memories layer by layer. At first, I noticed my late husband's old army lighter missing. I thought maybe I had misplaced it, so I searched every drawer, every shelf, and even the pockets of old coats. But it wasn't anywhere. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it must have fallen behind something, and I would find it later. Still, a quiet uneasiness spread inside me. I had kept that lighter safe for more than 30 years. It never moved unless I moved it. A few days later, I went to dust the dresser in that bedroom. The air felt different, disturbed, as if someone had been inside recently. When I opened the top drawer, I felt my stomach twist. The photograph of our wedding, one I kept wrapped in soft cloth, was gone. That picture had been the last gift he gave me before he passed. The frame, worn from age, had always stayed in the same corner. I stood there, holding the empty space where it used to rest. I ran my fingers across the dust pattern, the clear outline showing exactly where it had been. Now, it was missing too, and missing meant taken. I asked my daughter the next morning if she had moved anything. She looked at me with confusion and said she hadn't been upstairs at all. I believed her. She had never been the kind to go through my things, especially not that room. But when I looked over at my son-in-law, he didn't even lift his head from his phone. He only said, "Maybe it's a sign you need to let go." His voice didn't sound caring. It sounded annoyed, like my memories were an inconvenience to him. Something in me tightened when he spoke, as if the words carried truth he did not mean to reveal. The next items to disappear were even more painful. My husband's pocket watch, one he carried every day, vanished from the small wooden box I kept it in. I searched until my hands shook. The box was still there, but the watch was gone like smoke. Then a small silver chain, one he had bought for me on our 10th anniversary, disappeared too. These weren't things anyone could mistake for junk. They were all sentimental, personal, and valuable in the emotional sense. Whoever was taking them knew exactly what they meant to me. As each item vanished, the fear inside me grew stronger. It wasn't the kind of fear that makes you scream. It was the quiet kind, the one that sits on your shoulders, the one that whispers that someone is walking through your life, touching your past, stealing pieces of it without your permission. My nights grew longer. I started waking to check the hallway, pressing my ear against the bedroom door, trying to hear anything that would tell me I wasn't imagining all this. Sometimes, the silence was so heavy it felt like someone was standing right behind the door, listening back. One afternoon, I found the small lock on the bedroom door scratched as if someone had tried to open it quickly. The tiny marks were new. My heart pounded as I traced them with my fingertip. Someone had been trying to get inside, and it wasn't me. That was the moment when fear turned into certainty. The light flickers weren't just electrical issues. The noises weren't just old house sounds. The missing items weren't forgetfulness. Someone was entering that room at night, someone who had no right to be there. The hardest moment came when I found an empty spot where my husband's folded handkerchief used to sit. It was the last thing he touched in that room before he was taken to the hospital. Losing that handkerchief felt like losing him all over again. I stood there, staring at the empty space, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the dresser to steady myself. Every missing item was a wound reopening, a memory stolen, a goodbye repeated. When I asked again if either of them had gone upstairs, my daughter looked genuinely worried, asking if someone could be breaking in. But my son-in-law only said, "Stop worrying about old things." He didn't even pretend to comfort me. He didn't ask what was missing. He didn't even look surprised. And that told me more than his words ever could. Something was happening in my house, something hidden behind polite smiles and quiet footsteps, and the only person who wanted me to stop asking questions was the one who always had an excuse ready. That was when the fear turned into suspicion, sharp and heavy. I knew I wasn't imagining it. I knew someone was going into that room, and I knew I had to find out who and why before everything I cherished disappeared completely. That night, I forced myself to stay awake, even though my eyes felt heavy and my bones ached from the long day. I sat in the dark at the bottom of the staircase, wrapped in a thin blanket, listening to every sound in the house. The heater clicked, the clock ticked, the wind outside pushed softly against the windows, but I wasn't listening for those things. I was listening for the one sound that had been haunting me for nights, the slow, careful footsteps that always made their way toward the locked bedroom door upstairs. I kept replaying everything in my mind, all the strange moments from the last week, the flickering light, the faint noises in the room, the missing keepsakes that no one claimed to touch, the way my son-in-law's expression tightened every time I mentioned the room. All of it formed a knot in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I knew something was wrong, deeply wrong, and I needed to see it with my own eyes. Around midnight, the house fell completely silent, the kind of silence that made the air feel heavier. I sat still, afraid to even shift my weight on the chair, my ears strained for the smallest movement. For a long time, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself that maybe I was imagining everything, that maybe loneliness and age were playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, the soft creak of a step on the wooden staircase. Slow, careful, too careful. The kind of steps you take when you don't want to be noticed. My heart began to pound, but I didn't move. I leaned slightly forward, watching the shadows stretch under the dim hallway light. A shape appeared. A tall shape moving with a flashlight tucked against the side of his leg as if trying to hide the beam. My son-in-law, moving slowly, looking around before placing his foot on the next step. He didn't check downstairs. He didn't look toward the living room. He moved as if he already knew everyone was asleep, almost as if he had done this many times before. He reached the top of the stairs and paused in front of the door to my old bedroom, my husband's room. The room I had locked with my own hands. I watched as he pulled something from his pocket, a small tool set, thin metal pieces that glinted in the faint hallway light. He inserted one into the lock and twisted with quiet precision. His hands moved with confidence, like someone who had practiced this many times. The lock clicked open within seconds. My body went cold. The door pushed inward and he slipped inside, closing it almost completely behind him, leaving only a thin sliver of light stretching onto the hallway floor. I moved quietly, each step measured, careful not to cause the slightest sound. My heart beat so loud I worried he would hear it through the floor. I reached the upper landing and stopped just inches from the door, breathing slowly through my nose. Through the small crack, I finally saw the truth. He was inside the room, not just wandering or checking something. He was searching with purpose, methodical, focused. He opened drawers one by one, pulling out small boxes and envelopes. He checked under the bed, feeling along the wooden frame. He went through my late husband's closet, pushing aside old coats and uniforms, running his hands along the seams of every pocket. Then he knelt by the dresser, the one I had kept locked for years, and forced it open with a tool, taking out documents I had stored long ago, property papers, bonds, letters my husband left for me before he died, items that had nothing to do with him, nothing that belonged to him, nothing he had any right to touch. He spoke softly into his phone, whispering quick words. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. Found it. Almost done. She won't know. His voice was calm. Too calm, like he had been planning this for months, maybe longer. My legs trembled, but I didn't move. I stood there, frozen, feeling a mix of heartbreak and clarity hit me all at once. The missing items, the flickering light, the door left ajar. He hadn't been careless. He had been confident, confident that I wouldn't notice, confident that I was too old, too trusting, too tired to question him. Standing there, watching him pull apart the room that held the last pieces of my husband's life, I realized I had been living with someone who saw me not as family, but as an obstacle, someone who wanted what was mine, what my husband built for me, someone who thought I would never be brave enough to find out the truth. I watched until he finished digging through the last drawer. Then he pocketed a few papers, turned off the flashlight, locked the door again from the outside to make it seem untouched, and quietly walked back downstairs. I waited until his footsteps disappeared before stepping back into the shadows. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do next. That morning, after barely an hour of sleep, I sat at the dining table with the same key I had seen him use during the night. My hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from the shock of what I had witnessed for months. I had blamed age, memory, and grief for the strange things in that room. But now that the truth was in front of me, denial wasn't possible. I knew I needed help, someone who understood not just the legal side, but the emotional weight of violations like this. Someone who knew my husband, our history, and what that room meant to both of us. There was only one person who came to mind: Richard, my husband's oldest friend and our trusted lawyer. He had handled my husband's affairs after his death and had always told me, "If anything feels wrong, call me." I never imagined I would need to, but that morning I dialed his number with trembling fingers. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy but steady, and when I told him, "It's about the bedroom," he didn't hesitate. "I'm coming," he said, no questions asked. Within an hour, he was at my door, still in his winter coat, holding a notepad like he already knew this wasn't a small matter. I led him upstairs, pushed the bedroom door open, and let him see the room exactly as my son-in-law had left it. Drawers pulled halfway out, dust disturbed, small boxes misplaced, the faint smell of his cologne still lingering. Richard's face tightened. Not with confusion, but with certainty. He knew this wasn't random snooping. He asked me to walk him through everything: the flickering lights, the sounds, the missing items, the dismissive responses, and finally, the moment I saw my son-in-law slipping into this room with a flashlight, I spoke slowly, carefully, choosing my words the way one chooses steps on broken glass. He listened silently, nodding at every detail, occasionally writing in his notebook. When I finished, he walked around the room, checking the corners, the closet, even the floorboards. Then he sat beside me on the bed, the same bed my husband used to rest on, and said the words that confirmed my deepest fear. "He's not just taking keepsakes, he's searching for documents." I felt my chest tighten. I had suspected, but hearing it out loud made the room spin for a moment. Richard explained that old homes like mine often had property papers, bonds, and legal documents stored away in hidden places. My husband had kept certain deeds and records from decades ago, including papers that proved the house belonged fully to me, not jointly to anyone else. If my son-in-law had found those, he could have altered things, used them, or even tried to transfer ownership without my knowledge. The thought alone made my breath catch. This wasn't about sentimental theft anymore. This was about control, about my future, about my home. Richard asked if I had noticed anything strange with mail or bank notifications. I told him about the letter I found last week, one I assumed was a mistake, saying something about property valuation. I had thrown it away. Now he said, that was not a mistake. He's preparing something. My hands gripped the edge of the bed. It was all becoming painfully clear. The late-night movements, the growing interest in the bedroom, the subtle pressure from him suggesting we renovate or update ownership. It wasn't care, it was calculation. We went downstairs, and Richard spread his files across the dining table. He checked old records, photocopies, and digital notes he had kept after my husband's passing. He compared signatures, dates, property numbers, everything. His face changed when he saw one detail: My son-in-law had filed a quiet request for information from the county office about the property last month. That was the missing piece. That was why he had been searching so aggressively. "He wants proof," Richard said. "Proof that he can claim this place after you, and if he can't find it legally, he'll try to take advantage of your trust." I sat still, my heart pounding, but not in fear anymore. It was something else, something colder, sharper. Richard placed his hand on mine gently and said, "We need to act today, not tomorrow. Today." He drafted new papers, updated the title protections, added legal barriers that would make it impossible for anyone, even family, to access the property without my direct consent. Then he helped me secure the documents in a safe deposit box only I could open. As we finished, he looked at me and said, "You were right to trust your instinct. You were right to follow him. And now, you're right to fight back." For the first time in weeks, I felt like the ground under my feet was solid again. Betrayal hurts differently when it comes from inside your own walls, but having an ally who sees the truth, stands with you, and helps you rise, that gives you strength you didn't know you had. As Richard left, he said one last thing before walking out the door. "This house belongs to you, and so does your peace. We're not letting anyone steal either." And in that moment, I knew the war wasn't over. But I finally had someone fighting beside me. I waited until the whole house settled after dinner, the kind of quiet where you can hear even the clock hesitate between seconds. My daughter sat on the edge of the sofa, confused, but trying to keep things normal, stirring her tea without drinking it. My son-in-law walked in and out of the room, pretending to look busy, but his eyes kept flicking toward me, nervous, sharp, watching for any sign that I knew more than I let on. I let him wander like that for a while. Let guilt eat him from the inside. Let his own actions make him sweat. Sometimes silence is a stronger weapon than any words. Finally, when the moment felt still and heavy enough, I cleared my throat and asked them both to sit at the dining table. I didn't raise my voice, didn't show anger. Calmness scares people more because it means the storm already passed, and what comes now is consequence. I placed a single envelope on the table, no shouting, no accusations, just the envelope. My daughter frowned, confused, but my son-in-law stiffened so fast it was like someone had pulled a string inside him. He didn't even try to hide it. His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightened, and his fingers curled into fists on his lap. I watched every movement, every breath, every twitch. Guilt doesn't hide well. It leaks through skin the moment truth gets close. My daughter reached for the envelope first, but I gently moved her hand aside. This wasn't for her. She was blind because she trusted him. I was blind because I trusted both. But tonight, blindness ended. I opened the envelope and slid the photographs out. Pictures I had taken the previous night through the crack of that bedroom door. Pictures of him opening drawers that were not his, touching boxes that had been sealed for years, pulling out my late husband's things with a greed so obvious it made my stomach burn. The flashlight beam in the photo made his face look cold, stretched, almost hungry. My daughter gasped, one hand covering her mouth as she stared at her husband like she'd never seen him before. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. I watched him swallow hard, eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape that didn't exist. Then I placed the second set of papers, the lawyer's findings, property deed requests, attempts to access financial documents, forms he had partially filled with the intention to take control of the house. My daughter's hands started shaking. She whispered his name, once, twice, as if hoping he would say something reasonable, something that made sense. But he had nothing, not a single lie strong enough to cover this truth. He opened his mouth, closed it again, rubbed his forehead, then muttered, "I was just checking some things." It was a weak excuse. Even he didn't believe it. I looked directly at him, straight into his eyes, the kind of look only a mother, a widow, a woman who had built a home with her own hands could give. "You will leave this house tomorrow morning," I said, calm, firm, final. or I will hand all of this to the police, along with the footage." He blinked, stunned. My daughter turned to him, tears streaming silently. She whispered, "Is any of this true?" He didn't answer. Silence confirmed what words could not. He tried to lean forward, to say he could explain, that it was all a misunderstanding, that he never meant harm. But I raised my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Don't insult me further," I said. "I saw you. I heard you. I watched you take what wasn't yours." He looked away, jaw clenched, breathing hard. My daughter sobbed quietly beside him, not for him, for the marriage she thought she had, for the trust she thought was real. I picked up the envelope, gathered the papers, and stood. "Leave. Tomorrow morning. No arguments." My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. Strength grows differently when you've lived long enough, when you've survived loss, when you've carried love and pain in the same heart. My son-in-law looked at me, then at the pictures, then at his wife. He knew the truth had cornered him. There was no way out. My daughter, still crying, whispered, "Mom, what do we do now?" I gently put my hand on her shoulder, steady, warm, strong. "We protect what's ours," I said, "and we don't open doors for people who walked in with lies." And with that, the conversation ended. He lowered his head, defeated. She leaned into me, broken but safe, and I walked away, knowing that this house, my husband's house, my memories, my life, would no longer be touched by hands that came in darkness. When the meeting ended and the truth finally sat in the middle of the room like a heavy stone, the house felt different. It was no longer full of quiet fear, no longer full of hidden footsteps or flickering shadows behind closed doors. It was full of decisions, real, painful, final decisions that needed to happen before anyone could breathe normally again. My son-in-law did not argue, did not defend himself, and did not try to twist the story. He simply sat there, his face drained of color, and looked at the papers on the table as if they were weapons pointed straight at the life he had been trying to build behind my back. He understood that the line had been crossed, not by accident, not out of confusion, but knowingly, step by step, night after night, every time he went upstairs to take what did not belong to him. I watched him pack his small bag that evening. It was strange how quiet he was, how slow his hands moved, like he finally realized what it meant to lose trust. Real trust, the kind you can't buy back with apologies or excuses. He kept looking at the floor, avoiding my eyes, avoiding my daughter's eyes too. She stood near the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking, not because she wanted him to stay, but because she could not understand how she had missed so many signs. She kept repeating in a soft, broken voice, "Why would you do this to us?" He never answered. Maybe there was no answer that could make sense. Sometimes people hurt others out of greed, sometimes out of fear, and sometimes simply because they think they will never get caught. He left the house at sunrise. No goodbye, no apology, no explanation, just the sound of the door closing behind him. One soft click that felt louder than any scream I watched from the kitchen window as he walked down the driveway with his head lowered, hands in his pockets. It was the same driveway my husband had built with his own hands, the same path my children had played on when they were small, the same yard where my late husband once told me that this house would always stay safe as long as we protected it together. And now I understood why I had felt that sudden fear the night I saw the bedroom light flicker. It wasn't the past trying to haunt me. It was the present trying to warn me. Once he was gone, the house felt heavier for a moment, like it was sighing out the last of the tension that had been hiding in its walls. My daughter stayed inside the living room, crying softly, saying she didn't know how she had let things get so far. I sat beside her, held her hand, and told her something I had been afraid to say before. When someone you love changes, you always notice, but sometimes you pretend you don't, because the truth hurts more than the lie. She looked at me with swollen eyes, realizing that love is not blind. It just hopes too much. That afternoon, I met with the family lawyer again. Together, we updated the house papers, secured every document, and made sure no one could access anything without my permission. I finally felt in control again. Not angry, not vengeful, just steady. It was the kind of strength that comes only after months of feeling quietly unsafe. The lawyer told me I had done the right thing, that protecting the house meant protecting the memory of my husband, and for the first time in a long while, I felt proud of myself for not staying silent. In the days that followed, the house slowly returned to normal. No more late-night footsteps, no more drawers left open, no more faint noises behind the locked door. I cleaned my late husband's bedroom carefully, dusting the furniture, closing the curtains properly, making the bed the way he used to like it. When I finished, I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on my lap, and whispered softly, "It's safe now. I kept my promise." My daughter began to help more around the house, staying close, making tea, talking to me again like she used to. I could see guilt in her eyes, but also determination. She wanted to make things right. She wanted to rebuild the trust she had lost, not because of what she did, but because of what she ignored. And slowly, day by day, the house felt warm again. Not perfect, not healed completely, but warm. One evening, my granddaughter wandered upstairs and asked if the room with the flicker was okay now. I smiled, knelt beside her, and said, "It's okay." The light wasn't warning us of something scary. It was warning us of someone who forgot how to be honest. She nodded seriously, as if she understood everything, then hugged me tightly around the waist. That night, as I turned off the hallway lights, I paused outside the bedroom door. Not out of fear, out of gratitude. The flicker, the whispers, the late-night movements. They weren't haunting me. They were helping me see the truth. And now the truth had set my house free. When the dust finally settled and the house returned to a quiet rhythm, I realized how much of myself I had lost in the weeks of fear, suspicion, and betrayal. The silence inside these walls no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. It felt like a space I had taken back, inch by inch, from someone who thought he could slip into the shadows and take pieces of my life without consequence. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the walls, the photographs, remembering the years that had built this home, not the weeks that tried to break it. My daughter stayed close to me, quieter now, softer in her steps, as if she was afraid even breathing too loudly would reopen the wounds between us. She kept apologizing, not with dramatic words, but with quiet gestures, washing the dishes without being asked, checking the locks at night, sitting beside me when I drank my evening tea. I didn't blame her, not fully. Love blinds people in different ways, and sometimes the ones who hurt us most are the ones we trust too quickly. She had lived with a man who learned how to lie with a straight face, who learned how to smile while planning things he never had the courage to say out loud. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the shame of letting that kind of person into our home. But I also knew healing takes time, and time was something I still had left to give. Eventually, I went back to my late husband's room, the same room where the first flicker of suspicion began. I stood by the door for a long moment before I opened it. The air inside was still, untouched, like it had been waiting for me to return. I walked to the window, pulled the curtains open, and let the morning light fill the space. Dust danced in the brightness, like small memories coming back to life. The bed where he once slept looked peaceful again. The shelves, though missing a few things, still held the essence of who he was: simple, honest, quiet, loyal. I sat on the edge of the bed and rested my hand on the quilt he used to love. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel everything I had held back: the fear of losing my home, the anger at being dismissed, the heartbreak of seeing the people closest to me drift away without even realizing it. When I finally stood, I walked to the drawer where I kept his old handwriting samples, letters he wrote me when he traveled for work, notes he left on the fridge, even shopping lists with little jokes hidden in the margins. I took one out, the edges worn from age. "If anything ever happens to me, protect your peace." He wrote that decades ago, not knowing how much those words would guide me long after he was gone. I held the paper close, feeling his presence in the ink, in the curves of his handwriting, in the weight of each letter. I whispered softly, "It's safe now. You can rest." And I knew, deep inside, he would have been proud of how I handled everything. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with persistence and quiet courage. Outside the room, life started moving forward again. My grandchildren returned to their carefree ways, playing downstairs, arguing over cartoons, running through the hallway with the kind of innocence only children have. Their laughter became the new soundtrack of the house, loud, messy, honest. It reminded me that not every part of life needs to be controlled. Some parts simply need to be felt. I decided then that I would open my husband's room only when I wanted to, not because fear pushed me there, but because memories pulled me gently. Not everything needed to stay locked forever. Some things needed fresh air, sunlight, and time. A week later, I sat with my daughter at the kitchen table. She held my hand gently and said, "Mom, we'll never let anyone come between us again." And for the first time in a long while, I believed her. The betrayal we went through didn't destroy us. It rebuilt us, slower, sturdier, clearer. Sometimes crises don't break families. They reshape them into something stronger. Now, every evening before bed, I walk past that upstairs hallway. The light is always off. The shadows behave like shadows should. Nothing flickers, nothing moves, nothing whispers. The house is mine again. Not because I fought for it, but because I refuse to surrender it. That is the difference. Peace doesn't always come softly. Sometimes peace arrives only after you push back against the darkness that thinks it can take what you love. And when I finally lie down at night, closing my eyes, I remind myself of the simplest truth I learned through all of this. Not every danger comes from outside the home. Sometimes it grows quietly inside it until you choose to open the door, turn on the light, and face it. If you ever feel like something is wrong in your own home, trust your instincts. They are the last pieces of honesty we have when everyone else tries to make us doubt ourselves.